For Pen 4, we're going to be talking about the float property and the position property. And the way that we're going to get started with this and using both of those is an image gallery. That's something that actually makes a lot of sense to get started with first off. So what you're going to see here is that we've got this file. It says architectural photographers, and it's got some pictures. And you can see that it's in a list. You see the little bullet over here, and then it's got the person's name, the photographer's name underneath it. And all right, so this is what we've got. And what we ultimately want it to look like is potentially something like this, where you hover over, and you've got sort of an overlay with a word or the name. And you can also see that these are of varying sizes that fit in a grid, okay? All right, so this is kind of where we're headed. So to give you some just general idea, and let's get back to this, okay? So you'll notice, first of all, if you notice the space bar, or not space bar, scroll bar down here, it scrolls left and right because the images are too gigantic because we're not scaling them yet, and so on. So let's get this sort of set up basic, with basic stuff first. And we're going to pull up the CSS tab here, and we're going to start doing some stuff with the CSS. And the first thing is first, in that we should go ahead probably and make sure that the box sizing is set up. So that's the first thing I'll do. And remember from other things is that I'll do an asterisk to indicate all elements that are going to be in the page. And then we're going to set up a rule for that says box sizing like this. And we'll say that it's going to be border box, right? If you remember what that is, it essentially makes it so that you don't have to do complicated math. It'll just recalculate math. If you tell an element how big you want it ultimately to be, it'll use that final width as its dimension, and then it'll recalculate the way that it distributes padding and border inside of that. It doesn't extend out to the margin, but it does work for the padding and the border. Okay, so the other thing that we probably would want to go ahead and set up is the font. So let's just make sure that we're not using this, this kind of ugly font. Let's go to our assets, and we can just quickly find something else. I think what I'll do is I'll use Montserrat for the title. So let's go ahead and pull that. I'll copy at import, and I'll bring that into my CSS right there. And then maybe for the regular text, I'll use Open Sans. So I'll come over here, copy at import, and then I'm going to add that. Okay, and then so the next thing is that probably for all elements, I could put it on the body, or I could just add it here to all elements. I could say for all elements, let's use Open Sans. That's going to be to the default. And then for headings, I could go backwards and make it so that it's Montserrat. So I'm going to just do a shortcut here, and I'm going to find for Open Sans, I'll go ahead and copy font family here, just so I can get it working. And then what I can do is let's look at the heading level. The heading level in this page is an H1. And in case we add any other headings, let's see if we have anything else. Not so far, but let's go ahead and make a rule that for H1, and we'll just maybe go down to H2, because this is really not about headings so much. We're going to use a different font family. So let's use the Montserrat font family. So I'll copy font family. We'll do this quickly. All right. And then the other thing too is that I know that Montserrat, like if I were to close this and take a look at it, it's pretty heavy. But I also, maybe I want this to be uppercase. So let's see what happens if we say text transform is the way that you would designate if you want something to be all uppercase, right? And then there we go. And then that's pretty heavy. So you might look at that and say, well, what if we, instead of using the default 700, which is what it is, it's automatically picking up 700 as part of the default browser styling. It bolds it since it's a heading. Maybe what we can do is see what it looks like at 400. So we can say font weight, because remember that's the weight. Say font weight is 400. And I might like that a little bit better. Might be a little less dominant. All right, and then we can scroll down and see, yep, if Open Sans has been applied, and it has been, so you can see that it's no longer Times New Roman. All right, so that's a basic setup right there. The other thing that you'll notice that's happening is we've still got these bullets. Well, this is going to be like a sort of like a thumbnail kind of gallery, or a block gallery like I showed you, then we need to get rid of those bullet marks. So let's go ahead and do that. And if you remember, the bullets are applied to list items, so to the LI tag. So let's go down here and let's remove that. We'll say LI, but you could just do this. Let's say LI, and we're going to get rid of the list style. Let's say list style, and then you would say none for no list style, and then you'll see that bullet disappeared right here. Okay. Now the problem with this is that if you were to really and truly be doing this for a real page, you might be concerned because maybe there's other text on the page that's not part of this gallery, and you don't want those list items to have no bullets, so, or numbers or whatever. So in that case, you wouldn't want to just apply it to all list items. This is an example where doing something with specificity is important. Like, so if you look at line 2 of the HTML up here, it says that the UL has an ID of gallery. What you could do is you could go over here and you could say, all right, anything that is in the gallery ID and that is a descendant list item is going to have a list style of none. So that means that any other list anywhere else in the page, if we were to add one, would still have bullets. And if you wanted to double check that, you could come down here and we could make another UL, for instance, and let's just go ahead and end it. And we'll just put one list item there, and we'll just end that as well. And then I'm going to say test. All right. And then if I scroll down to the bottom, you see that this, where it says test, it has a bullet. So that's good. That means that it's only applying it to the gallery list items. All right. So I'm going to get rid of that because I actually don't need it. And in fact, what you could also do, just so that you can see something that's going to happen later, is at the very bottom, let's go ahead and add an H2. Let's just add some other heading level, and we'll say this is a heading level 2 or something like that. All right, 2. Let's do that, and then we can make sure that it's down there. And you see, because I've got uppercase on it, even though it's not typed in uppercase, it's making all letters uppercase. So that's fine. Okay, that being done, the next thing that you need to pay attention to is, if you take a look at this, let's scroll the way up, you'll see that this whole thing is indented, right? And you might be wondering why that is. And if you remember back to what I told you before, the default browser styling, since we're not using a reset right now, the default browser styling is always going to add about 40 pixels of padding on the left side of an unordered list or an ordered list. So if we wanted to get rid of that, then what we need to do is come over here and we need to say that the UL whose ID is gallery, because you don't necessarily want to do this to all ULs, right? And then the reason that you would say UL pound gallery without a space in between is because gallery is actually the ID that is assigned to this UL. It's not a descendant, like it's not applied to something down nested inside of it. It's actually applied to the UL, and that means that you would have to say UL pound gallery, no spaces, okay? So in this case, we would say, for that, we'd have padding of 0. You can't say padding none. None is not a valid value for padding in CSS. All right, so now that we've done that, we've gotten rid of that. All right, now the other thing that's going to really help us kind of find this page a little bit more manageable, because if I do this, you see it's like still the picture's just way too big. So what we could at least do for now is we could at least go ahead and tell that tell images that we don't want them to be any bigger than 100%. And so for right now, let's just go ahead and add a rule down here, and we'll apply it to images that are inside of the gallery. So we can say pound gallery, right, or hashtag gallery. And then in this case, we do want a space, and we want to put IMG, because the IMG tag, you'll see here, up like on line 4, let me zoom in a little bit, you'll see here that the IMG tag is a descendant of gallery, right? It's inside, it's nested inside. So anyway, so let's come back here and let's finish typing that, and we'll say that the width is 100%, okay? And then it becomes essentially 100% of its parent. And in this case, its parent is the list item. And the list item, because the list item isn't being told how big to be, it is 100% of its parent, which is the gallery, and it is 100% of its parent, which is the body tag. Okay, so now if I scale this, at least we're seeing the entire image. And you'll notice that these are all square pictures, right? So we're using square pictures, which is going to be something that's important in understanding that this lesson is going to work the way that it works. All right, so some of the things would be exactly the same regardless of whether or not the pictures are square. And whenever I get to the place where it actually matters that they're square, I'll explain why it matters that they're square. Okay, so this is a good place to stop for the basic setup. And what I would suggest that you do is you go ahead and save this as a fork, and maybe if you want to have steps, you don't have to have steps, but if you'd like to have steps so that you can see your progress and follow along, and also maybe go back to a place, like if you feel like you screw your code up in a way that you can't recover from it, then you could at least go back later to a previous step if you want. Okay.